Today we begin looking at concepts related to hypothesis testing, and we will start by looking at how to go about writing null and alternative hypotheses. Recall that up to this point in time, we have discussed confidence intervals as a means of estimating a possible population parameter value, and at this point we have only focused on population proportions. In contrast with confidence intervals, hypothesis testing is a means of evaluating claims about a population parameter. There are two competing ideas or hypotheses involved. First, there is what we call the null hypothesis. That is denoted by capital H subscript 0. And secondly, there is what we call the alternative hypothesis, denoted by a capital H subscript A. Note that the null hypothesis often represents what we call a skeptical position or a perspective of no difference. So now let's discuss how to go about writing null and alternative hypotheses. Firstly, when composing a null hypothesis, we will always assume equality for the parameter value in question. Secondly, when composing an alternative hypothesis, in this course, we will always assume not equal for the parameter value in question. And here I need to add a caution for someone who may have taken a statistics course before. That differs from what some other textbooks have in that they allow other symbols like less than or equal to, and so on. In this course, it's always going to be not equal. Now, note that that implies that in this course, we are always performing what is known as a two-tail test. So let's go ahead and practice seeing how to symbolically write null and alternative hypotheses. Please take a moment to read the scenario that is on the screen. I would encourage you to pause the video and do so, and then I'll come back and we'll discuss how to write some null and alternative hypotheses for this scenario. Okay, hopefully you paused the video and read carefully through that. First of all, notice in this scenario, the word most implies that we are interested in a population proportion of students. Therefore, when we write our null hypothesis, notice symbolically I've written it as H subscript 0 with a colon after it, and then P stands for population proportion. We're going to say that that's equal to 5/10 or 1/2 or 50%. Notice what this statement is really saying. It is a skeptical position that says that neither a majority nor a minority of students' grades improved. So the alternative to that would be that the population proportion is not equal to 1/2. And notice that that is saying that either a majority, that is more than a half, or a minority, that is less than a half of students' grades improved in this case. And that would be the way that we would symbolically write the null and alternative hypothesis in this case. Now, before we move on to the next scenario, it's also worth pointing out that the tutoring company is probably interested in the alternative hypothesis, and more than likely they're interested in seeing if their company leads to an improvement, that is a majority of the students' grades improving. All right, let's take a look at another scenario. Again, I have it displayed on the screen. Please take a moment to pause the video, take some time to carefully read through the scenario and make sure you understand what it is talking about. And then I will come back and discuss some aspects of how we would use this scenario to construct some null and alternative hypothesis statements. All right, hopefully you've taken some time to carefully read through that statement. Let's start taking a look at something that we notice. First of all, the word average within the statement implies that we are interested in a population mean. Specifically, we're interested in the mean number of minutes that employees are unproductive. So therefore, in this particular case, the null hypothesis could be written as the population mean is equal to 15 minutes, and that's shown symbolically on the screen. Notice what that's saying is it's a skeptical position that is stating that the average amount of company time each employee spends not working is 15 minutes during March Madness. In other words, no more nor less than what they typically would spend being unproductive already. The alternative, and more than likely this is what the company is really interested in finding out, the alternative is that the mean number of minutes that an employee spends is not equal to 15 minutes of being unproductive. And of course, that is stating that the average amount of time the average amount of company time each employee spends not working, is different than 15 minutes during March Madness. So as with the previous two scenarios, please go ahead and take a moment to pause the video, carefully read through this scenario, and then we will talk about how we would go about constructing some null and alternative hypotheses for this particular scenario. Okay, hopefully you've gone ahead and taken some time to read through that. Notice the following. The word average in the scenario statement again implies that we are interested in a population mean. In this case, the mean number of calories that are taken in by diners at this restaurant. So the null hypothesis can be plainly stated as mu equals 1100, which means that we are saying that the average calorie intake of diners at the restaurant remains the same as it had been before menus had calories printed on them. This is a skeptical position. We're saying it stays at 1100 calories. The alternative would be that the mean number of calories that are taken in by diners differs from 1100, and more than likely the nutritionist is interested in it being less than 1100 calories. But again, we write it as just not equal, so it takes into account both less than or greater than for that particular alternative hypothesis. Okay, let's take a look at one final, our fourth scenario. Again, please take some time to pause the video, carefully read through the scenario, and as you're doing so, maybe even stop and think about how you would write a null and alternative hypothesis for this particular scenario. All right, so hopefully you've taken some time to pause the video and read through the statement. Let's start talking a little bit about this particular scenario. So note the following. The word fraction in this particular scenario's problem statement implies that we're interested in a population proportion. Specifically, in this case, the proportion of adult residents in the state of Wisconsin. Therefore, symbolically, we would write our null hypothesis as population proportion equals 70% or 7/10. And notice what that says. It's a skeptical position that says that the rate of alcohol consumption for adult Wisconsin residents is the same as the national average, no less nor no more. The alternative to that would be, of course, that the rate of alcohol consumption for adult Wisconsin residents differs from the national average of 70%. That is, it's either less than or greater than 70%. We don't know which of those two would be true, but we just are looking for whether it differs from 70%.